Chapter 31, Meals Together. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Ouyang Xiaochen swiftly caught the pillow and placed it aside. He shot a glance at Murong Shue's direction and promptly left the room. She followed his stare and realized that she was looking at her chest. Admittedly, she was still a little bit immature, but she was just 14 years old and had plenty of room for improvement. Just like the body she had in the modern times, after she became 17 or 18, people had admired her for it. She folded back the bed covers and got out of bed. Behind the folding screen, she then wore her undergarments, dress robe and prepared herself to look presentable. Only after then did she emerge from the room. Outside the room, there was an oak table amidst in which dishes, pastries, spring rolls and porridge were placed upon. The aroma of the enticing food was enough to send anyone drooling. Ouyang Xiaochen was standing by the washing basin cleaning his hands. The crystal-clear hot spring water passed through his hands, uncontaminated. Seeing that Murong Shue had appeared, he took up a wet cloth and wiped the water beads from his hands. "It's getting late, let's eat," he said dryly. Murong Shue frowned. At first, it was to sleep together on the bed and now, eating together at the same table. This sounds more like a husband and wife thing to do. Wait, why did she think of it that way? "Much thanks, Ouyang Your Highness, but I'm not famished right now, and returning to the Jin country palace to feast then, wouldn't be too late either." An arm stretched and gripped her shoulder, it was as if the fingers on it were made out of jade itself. Ouyang Xiaochen then directed her to the oak table. "Yesterday, you were suffering from cold poison and was tossing and turning the whole day. For 7 or 8 hours, you did not eat anything, and even if you aren't hungry, you should at least eat a bit. Or else your body will become weaker." Murong Shue's beautiful eyes glistened and squinted. Silently, she tried to escape from her constraints. However, with just the slightest touch of Ouyang Xiaochen finger which contained immeasurable power, Murong Shue wasn't able to move. Her powers couldn't be exerted, not even in the slightest bit. She knew she couldn't stand a chance against Ouyang Xiaochen immense power and stopped struggling. She lifted her head to glare at him. Ouyang Xiaochen ignored her glare. Seeing that she had calmed in some measure, he released his touch and gracefully sat beside her. He then scooped some rice porridge, daintily placed some vegetables on top and placed a few pieces of plum cakes in the small dish in front of her. Murong Shue gazed at the fragrant plum cakes, shocked. "How did you know I like plum cakes?" "Try guessing," Ouyang Xiaochen replied, his jet-black diamond eyes gleaming with a hint of humor. Murong Shue glared at him again. She thought, fine. Not like I'm interested anyway. Murong Shue picked up a plum cake and shoved it in her mouth. The fragrance and the softness of the cake filled her mouth. One tends to not feel hungry after recovering from the poison, however, it is encouraged to have some white porridge to regain strength. Murong Shue thought it was appropriate to eat something to nourish herself, and coincidentally, plum cakes were her favorite, so she ate a few more pieces. Moreover, Ouyang Xiaochen was eyeing her from the side. She felt compelled to eat something or else he would never let her go. Murong Shue used impeccable speed to finish the plum cakes and stood up after that. "Ouyang Shitzi, I've had my fill, please take your time to have your meal." Ouyang Xiaochen expression turned solemn. He put down his bowl and chopsticks and brought over the dish with a wet cloth. He proceeded to pat his hands with the cloth. What seemed like a simple action was more of a graceful gesture when it was done by him. "I'll send you back to the Jin mansion," he bellowed, his clear voice piercing the air. Murong Shue quickly shook her head and said, "Thank you, Your Royal Highness, for your kind gesture. But the Jin mansion isn't far, please, I have no need to trouble Your Highness." "Your Royal Highness, you better hurry back to pay respects to your father and mother instead. It is known for noble people being filial first among all else." Ouyang Xiaochen hadn't been home for 10 years and now he had just returned. It's only a matter of fact that he should pay respects to his parents. She thought. This is the best excuse to get him away from me. They're not in Jing City, they went to explore the great mountain, Dechuan, he said wryly, as if it were a common thing to do at that time. They wanted to see it for themselves, the sakura and blossoms at Gangnam, the desert outside the Great Wall. They abandoned the duty in which the palace called and together they explored the world. His Royal Highness and his wife really are royalty people who do not care for either fame or power. It was no wonder Ouyang Xiaochen left the palace when he was just 8 years old. He was out touring the world, so this trait was inherited from his parents. It's still early and I'd like to stroll around the city for a while without a chariot. I won't trouble your Royal Highness in sending me home, goodbye. Murong Shui excused herself with a polite smile and without waiting for Ouyang Xiaochen to reply, she turned and paced quickly outside. Once out of the yard, she followed the black stoned path. Hastily, she ran out of the palace and took a few quick turns in the alley. She stopped and looked at the empty streets behind her. Secretly, she was relieved. Thanks to herself, she had fast reflexes and body movement which enabled her to swiftly do countless corner turns. To be fair, she thought he was a fairly decent guy, but he exuded a dangerous aura and she didn't want to be associated with him in any way. Murong Shui strolled on the streets of Jing City and saw the hustle-bustle of the city scenes. The varied hawkers doing their business and the rowdy haggling that came from them made the corner of her mouth tilt and it emitted a small smile. The host has lived in a district that snowed, had very little exercise, had a body in which, when the wind blew would knock her out. This resulted in frequent frostbites which was so painful that you were better off dead. She had to walk more and train her body to become better so that when that happened, she wouldn't feel as much pain. A gentle breeze blew and gracefully lifted her thick, inky black hair. With the radiance of the sun, she looked even more beautiful. In which, this attracted many onlookers to admire her beauty, her fair skin, her glistening eyes like pristine waters, and wondered, which noble family did she belong to. Murong Shui, however, was oblivious to the stares and continued walking. Her distant stare broke the rowdy haggling and the hawkers doing business. "Cousin," a sudden enthusiastic voice bore into the scene. The voice came from a young man who was wearing a silvery white long robe. He hurried to catch up with her and was soon in front of her, blocking her path. The man took a greedy stare at her beauty before saying, "Shui, my cousin. Long time no see. Don't pretend to ignore me when you've already seen me." Looking at his spontaneous actions and stare, she raised her brow. "Who are you?" This man knew her name and even called her cousin. But there was no memory of this person in the host. The man laughed and lifting his chin, as if keen on introducing himself he replied, "I am Du Qinjiang, cousin, surely you have heard of my name." Du Qinjiang. Isn't that the eldest grandson of Du families? Every new year, he and his family would come to the Zhen country palace as a guest. But because of the fact that the host's body wasn't in good condition and the Du family did not take a liking to her, she was never asked to go to the courtyard to meet guests. Murong Shui let out a soft and continued on her way, her pale green dress robe fluttering in the breeze which brought out the faint feminine scent of herself. Du Qinjiang breathed in her scent and his eyes glimmered. Seeing that Murong Shui had passed him and resumed her walk, he hurried to catch up to block her pathway again. He did not bother to hide his gaze admiring her from top to toe or even his gleaming eyes. He said, "Shui cousin, don't walk away from me. Since we're cousins and hardly meet, let's chat more." Chapter 32, Beat Up Her Cousin. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Request. We are looking for an editor for our team. If anyone is interested, please contact us at Shitsi. Means, heir son, referring to the heir apparent of Qin Wang, basically son of the emperor's brother. Qin Wang. Means a prince of first rank or a prince of blood. I don't know you very well, so there's nothing to talk about. Murong Shui said coldly, on her naturally beautiful face, she wore an icy gleam in her eyes. Watching her forged a kind of desire in Du Qinjiang's heart. He looked at her even more intently with his pervert beady eyes, taking in her full body and face. How can you say that? We're cousins. You didn't know me back then, but now you do. Go away. Murong Shui exclaimed, cutting his babbling and gave him an icy stare. The Du family consists of people who are either avaricious or lascivious. She didn't even want to bother to waste her time talking to such people. The passing pedestrians chuckled at the scene. Their silent snickering made Du Qinjiang flushed with embarrassment. He glared at Murong Shui and said, Murong Shui, I only feared that you were saddened by the fact that Prince Jing had demeaned you as his concubine, so I came over to comfort you. Don't give me that rude attitude of yours. When he was a guest at the Zhen Manor, he did accidentally meet Murong Shui. Her lovely face and petite figure left him with a lustful fervor. The only thing that stopped him was the fact that she was Prince Jing's wife. Be. He dared not make a move. What he did not expect was that when Prince Jing returned, he turned Murong Shui into a concubine instead, without caring for her feelings. It was obvious that Prince Jing didn't like her as much as he thought. Even if she has the position of Prince Jing's concubine, Prince Jing wouldn't mind if he had some kind of relationship with her. First time strolling around the city and I meet this prick. He completely fouled my mood, and what was that terribly constructed excuse he just made? Absolutely disgusting. Murong Shui increased the hostility of her stare, it was like an arrow directing at Du Qinjiang. Shut up. Du Qinjiang felt the hairs on his body stood up. It's so creepy that this stare is so compelling. Master, his manservant blurted out while shaking his arm. He had seen Murong Shui's frightful glare and thought. Why is the Zhen Manor princess's stare so terrifying? Du Qinjiang returned to his senses. His shame became the rage. How could he, a great man of nobility background, be scared of a weak girl's glare? It was humiliating. Murong Shui, I was teasing you because I regarded you as an equal. Don't you dare throw that obscene temperament at me. As he was speaking, that he stretched his hand to grab Murong Shui. She sensed it and dodged his hand. She then lifted her leg and swiftly kicked the lower part of his body forcefully. Du Qinjiang was unprepared and was kicked in the groin. He backed away 2-3 meters and fell with a heavy thump on the ground. Clutching his abdomen, he shouted with pain. It hurts. Murong Shui pulled back her leg and peered at him rolling on the ground in pain. She wore the same icy look on her face. Master! Du Qinjiang's manservant exclaimed as he regained his senses. He then quickly ran over to help him up. Du Qinjiang, supported by his manservant, was holding his groin, his face pale with misery. With his lips quivering and his eyes glaring at her, he said, Murong Shui, just you wait. I will never let you off. Scram! Murong Shui kicked a stone and sent it flying towards him. It hit him squarely on the forehead, leaving a swell. It was all too much for Du Qinjiang to bear, he had tears in his eyes and he immediately fell silent. He could only furiously glare at her as his manservant carried him to the nearest medical clinic. Finally, the nuisance is gone. The corner of Murong Shui's mouth tilted to reveal a smile and she turned to go on with her walk. Bang! Only to crash into a human wall. She was in pain and her tears rolled down uncontrollably. She paced quickly backward and saw the culprit's handsome face. Frowning, she asked, when did you get here? Just now. Ouyang Xiaochen replied, staring down at her embarrassed face. His jet-black diamond eyes gleamed with a tinge of humor as he stepped forward, holding a handkerchief and tried to gently wipe away the tears on her face. He was already there when she met Du Qinjiang, seeing that he wasn't her opponent and that she had taught him a lesson, he didn't intervene. When Murong Shui felt the tender touch of his hand, she regained her senses and realized that she was looking at Ouyang Xiaochen's face at a very close distance. Her eyes swept across nervously and grabbed the handkerchief. Sorry for troubling you, Your Highness, allow me to do it myself. Did you follow me? Having the handkerchief snatched from him, his expression turned slightly downcast. He put down his hand and lightly shook his head. No, I had some errands to attend to and coincidentally passed by here. Wiping away her tears, Morong Shui asked, where are you off to attend your errands? Zhuke Street, he said calmly. Zhen Manor was at Changxing Street, Zhuke Street was just a street apart. It's already noon and I'm going to the restaurant to have my meal. If your Royal Highness has anything urgent to attend to then hurry on to Zhuke Street, she replied, smiling sweetly and hurried towards Yang restaurant. Even if he was really going to Zhuke Street to attend to errands or not, he couldn't possibly be going to the same place as her now. Ouyang Xiaochen looked on as she ran ahead. He gazed at her, deep in puzzled thought. Why did she always try to avoid him as if he were scorpions or snakes? In the dining hall of Yang restaurant, the waiters balanced trays and shuttled back and forth. The place was filled with all kinds of delicious food smells that sent people drooling. The shopkeeper stood behind the counter, tick-tock-talking his abacus. He smiled as he saw the thick book of financial records. Are there still any private rooms left? Morong Shui stood in front of the counter asking in a soft voice. The dining hall was already full. If she wanted to have her meal, she would have to book a private room. I'm sorry madam, our private rooms are fully occupied. The shopkeeper replied her politely with a smile. Morong Shui scowled slightly, there are no available seats in the dining hall and the private rooms are fully occupied, seems like she has to go somewhere else. Shui. Ouyang Xiaochen walked elegantly into the dining hall, the exquisite flower pattern on his clothing resonate his noble status. The crowded dining hall had suddenly come into a silence. The people stared at him with admiration. Who is this young man? He looks extraordinarily handsome. It seems like he is the Shitzi who just came back to the town, Ouyang Xiaochen. He is Ouyang Shitzi, he is indeed as impressive as he is reputed to be. Ouyang Xiaochen ignored the discussion of the crowd and walked slowly toward Morong Shui. Looking straight at him, Morong Shui asked, didn't you go to the Zhuke Street to get your things done? The person in charge is not in. I've booked a private room on the second floor to wait him. If you want to have your meal, you can come with me. Ouyang Xiaochen looked at her gently. Morong Shui frowned a little. The dining hall is crowded with people, and the private rooms are fully occupied. If she rejects his offer, she will definitely have to wait for a long time. Ouyang Xiaochen has actually made a reservation for the private room earlier on, which means that he is not tracking her. Thinking that there is no harm to have a meal in the private room with him, she said, thanks, Shitzi. Chapter 33, Confrontation at the Restaurant. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Okay. Ouyang Xiaochen replied, with a smile in his eye that vanished immediately. Please come with me, this way. The waiter ushered Morong Shui and Ouyang Xiaochen up to the second floor. A young lady is sitting in the land's room on the second floor. She was wearing a purple dress, with a perfect body line and strikingly beautiful face. She is the princess from Mabe, Qin Yuyuan. The people were praising her in a low voice. She put down the chopsticks and glanced at Ouyang Xiaochen as he walked up the stairs. The perfection of his jawline and his charming face can hardly make people take their eyes off him. His mesmerizing eyes and dark pupils. Everything in him is just perfect. He really is the carefree king's heir. In the northern Mongolian deserts, she met Ouyang Xiaochen several times. She got to know that he was talented in many ways, in literary, martial arts, painting, chess-playing. The talents that he possessed very much exceeded all those who tried to compete with him. There was one thing, however, he never approached women. No matter how beautiful or elegant they were, even if they were standing in front of him, he wouldn't take notice of them. The cold, distant face of his which seemed to reject all those around him, left the women in the desert heart-broken. Yet she heard Ouyang Xiaochen invites a girl to his private room to eat with him. It was astonishing. Who was this mysterious girl who made him change his attitude towards females? Her observing eyes swept towards Ouyang Xiaochen. She saw that beside him was a girl whose face was as beautiful as blossoms, who had eyes like pristine waters, hair like dark clouds, and on her dress, life-like flowers embroidered onto it. Her graceful movement was matched with the smooth fair skin of hers. She emanated a radiant, youthful aura. Murong Shui. How could it be her? Didn't Yi Chen unexpectedly abandon her, the one who was always sick? How did she gain the favor of Ouyang Xiaochen, who never went near women? Qin Yuyuan's beautiful eyes squinted. Could she has performed some extraordinary acts on him? It seems right. How can the young miss of Zhen Manor be a concubine to anyone? Yi Chen is the prince of war. In the whole of Qinyan, you cannot find many talented people like him. Since Murong Shui already has him as a future husband, naturally, she wouldn't want to be with just any simple folk. Despite that, she and Yi Chen have a mutual beneficial relationship. Yi Chen would never let her marry Ouyang Xiaochen. The carefree royalty parents of Ouyang Xiaochen would also never accept a woman who has been divorced. Murong Shui is destined to be the Yi Chen's concubine. Being a concubine should have its limits. How could she cheat her future husband to seduce men outside? Yi Chen may not be in Yeyang restaurant, but allow her, the future queen of Qinyan, to let Murong Shui know her position and where she truly belongs to. The Meixiang private room Ouyang Xiaochen had booked was a lavish room with a black marbled floor so shiny that you could even see your reflection in it. The tables and chairs were made up of rose wood, the handiwork on it was exceptionally good. Murong Shui casually sat in front of the round table and scanned the menu. She then ordered some of the signature dishes recommended by the restaurant. Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted a white robe. Since you didn't eat anything back in the palace, you should order something, she casually suggested. I'm not hungry, I'll just have some wine. Ouyang Xiaochen responded. All right then, please wait briefly while we prepare your order, the waiter said, smiling as he proceeded to pace quickly out of the room. Didn't you have errands to attend to at Juke Street? Why are you drinking wine here? It wouldn't be good if you happen to get drunk and make a scene. Murong Shui said while she poured Ouyang Xiaochen and herself some tea. The corner of Ouyang Xiaochen's mouth broke to reveal a smile. This wine is made from qiong flowers. It's said to be wine but doesn't have a much alcoholic smell. It's also fragrant and it doesn't make you drunk easily. Single women like to drink this. Really? Murong Shui's eyes glimmered. She didn't like the bitterness and rich taste of wine in this era. Back in the modern world, she only drank red wine and champagne. Upon entering the Qinyan country, she only saw different types of white wine and all of them were bitter and rich in flavor. Because of that, she cancelled the thought of enjoying wine. She did not expect to find any wine that wasn't bitter or rich in Qinyan until Ouyang Xiaochen mentioned about that wine. Seeing her glistening eyes, Ouyang Xiaochen's eyes were tinged with humor. You can try some when it gets here. Thank you. Murong Shui smiled delightfully. If that wine really wasn't too rich in flavor, she could drink a glass before she went to bed every day, like what she did in the modern world with red wine. Heir of Ouyang and Miss Murong, a gentle voice called out. Murong Shui snapped out of her reverie and turned towards the direction of the voice. There she saw Qin Yuyuan and her maidservant walking towards them. Her face was as alluring as flowers and on her face, she wore a friendly smile. She was dressed in an elegant long dress which swept the floor as she walked, leaving faint trails behind. How did I wind up meeting her? What a small world. Murong Shui frowned and with an expressionless tone, she said, Princess Qin, have you come to Yeyang restaurant to have your meal too? Yes. And no, Qin Yuyuan let out a small smile. I heard that the women in Qinyan were beautiful, smart and talented. So I came to Yeyang restaurant to learn musical skills from them. It turns out that Yeyang restaurant was not only a dining place but also a place to display artistic talents. The noble people of Jing City, especially the rich single women, liked to gather in the private rooms. There they would happily compete and learn from one another in many things, playing musical instruments, writing poems, making arts. I have already competed with a few people and my Yangqin musical skills have improved in some measure. Murong Shui is the young miss of Jin Manor, I'm sure you also know how to play the Yangqin. Could you possibly teach me a few tips for playing? Qin Yuyuan said, eyeing at Murong Shui, maintaining her smile. Qin Yuyuan is the princess of the northern Mongolian deserts and also the future wife of Prince Jing. The citizens of Jing City had long spread the news about her beauty and musical talents. Her musical skills in Yangqin were so remarkable that even the cranes flew down to witness her playing. Why would she even need tips then? I'm sorry Princess Qin, but I don't know how to play. So I can't possibly teach you anything. Murong Shui responded, rejecting Qin Yuyuan's request. Qin Yuyuan did not seem to be bothered by the rejection. Still, she smiled and replied, Miss Murong, you must be joking, the mistress of Jin Manor was the most talented woman in Jing City. No one could beat her. And as her daughter, how could you not know how to play? Murong Shui sneered at her remark. The host's mother had passed away when she was just 4 years old, how could she have taught her any of her skills? After that, she got frostbite in the snow and was frequently sick. Before the age of 10, she had spent the majority of her life lying on the bed, how could she even learn any artistic skills? Yi Chen had known that Murong Shui had gotten frostbite and naturally he knew that she had no artistic skills. And as his future wife-to-be, Qin Yuyuan must have known that. Yet, she had asked her to give her tips on musical skills in front of everyone. She was obviously challenging her and wanted her to make a fool out of herself. She has been here just to have a meal. So why was she purposely giving her a hard time? Chapter 34, Competition. You are listening at novelfull.audio. By admin December 10, 201,613 comments. 2 beautiful girls, one standing and the other sitting, this was a scene to behold. The customers who were having their meal were in high spirits. In groups, they gathered and started a discussion among themselves. The one standing is the princess of the northern Mongolian deserts, Qin Yuyuan. She is very elegant and alluring. Who is the one sitting? She has such a beautiful face. Did you not hear that the princess had said the one sitting is the Jin country queen's daughter? She is Murong Shui. She was the one who was demeaned to a concubine instead. Murong Shui, though her face is pale and she possesses a weak body, but she has a youthful aura and she seems prettier than Princess Qin. Murong Shui, prettier than her. A hint of gloominess appeared in Qin Yuyuan's eyes and then vanished in an instant. Lady Murong, Queen of Jin country, was unbeatable. Murong Shui must have inherited her skills. But she keeps declining, claiming that her skills aren't good. Is it because she thinks Princess Qin's skills are so poor that she doesn't deserve to even learn from her? The voices of exchange rambled on, a third of them were quiet, another somber and the other argued on fiercely. Ouyang Xiaochen's jet black diamond like eyes were quiet, he stared at Qin Yuyuan coldly. He was about to open his mouth to say something when Murong Shui stopped him and smiled at Qin Yuyuan. To force Murong Shui to compete with her, she had brought up her host's deceased mother who had passed away 10 years ago. If she didn't comply, maybe she would have even brought up the topic of the host's ancestors. As a descendant, she couldn't help them restore their former glory. But she will not let them not rest in peace. It's only a matter of playing the Yangqin, she will oblige. A simple competition is too boring, what about if we bet on something? Qin Yuyuan smiled. That means she has agreed to play. What should we bet on then? Qin Yuyuan's purpose was to just force Murong Shui to play the Yangqin, so Murong Shui can make all the rules she likes. The more rules she makes, the more she would be humiliated in front of everyone. Let's bet on the Yangqin you have. Murong Shui said, it looks like a Jiaowei Yangqin, if I win, it shall be mine. Jiaowei Yangqin is a type of Yangqin, a traditional Chinese musical instrument, win such guts? Qin Yuyuan has met many gifted players in the desert but none of which who could beat her. Qin Yuyuan looked at Murong Shui, what if you lose? I will pay you a yang qin with the same value as a jiaowei yang qin. Murong Shui responded with a serious tone. Deal. Qin Yuyuan's eyes gleamed. She wasn't interested in what she would pay her when she lost. Instead, she just wanted to see the result of Murong Shui losing. If there was something that could make people remember that Murong Shui's skills were not like they had expected, it was her obligation to do so. Deal. Murong Shui replied readily. She looked out the door with the corner of her eye. Waiter, bring me a yang qin. Qin Yuyuan returned to the Lanxiang private room, in which the door was opened, and sat in front of her jiaowei yang qin. The waiter went into Meixiang private room to deliver the yang qin and placed it in front of Murong Shui. At that moment, the atmosphere at Yeyang restaurant instantly became uproarious. Who is Qin Yuyuan? She is the princess of the northern Mongolian deserts, Prince Jing's wife. To be and the future queen of Qinyan. Then who is Murong Shui? She is the first daughter of the Jin country queen. She was initially the first wife. To be of Prince Jing. However, Prince Jing demeaned her to a concubine. She was set up by Qin Yuyuan. But she didn't want to be a concubine and did not want to be recognized as that position. The future queen of Qinyan and the first wife. 2. B of Prince Jing met and now they're going to compete. Even if they compete because they're jealous of each other or it was to just purely to display their skills, this would be an impressive match. It is so rare to see two remarkably beautiful women competing with each other, even if you're just passing by, you mustn't miss this. The customers in the dining hall put down their bowls and chopsticks and looked towards the direction of the two private rooms. Their eyes filled with anticipation. The other customers who were in their separate private rooms opened their doors and came out to witness the occasion too. Qin Yuyuan gently tuned her instrument and fixed a smile at Murong Shui. Guests first, why you don't take the lead? No, Murong Shui shook her head, her eyes glistening. Let's play together. Qin Yuyuan was aghast. Under normal circumstances, the yang qin was meant to be played one after another. This was to let the observers compare who played it better, and yet, Murong Shui wants to play it with her at the same time. Does she not know that the weaker of the two would certainly be outplayed by the stronger one? This would only emphasize how dreadful the playing of the weaker one was. She must be pretty reckless. Does she have a death wish? I shall grant her wish. Alright, let's play together then. You first. No, Princess Qin, you first. Murong Shui smiled politely, her small pale hands were placed on the strings. Shui. Ouyang Xiaochen looked at Murong Shui, his dark eyes showing concern. He had heard Qin Yuyuan played before, she was outstanding. Don't worry, I might not lose. Murong Shui smiled, her eyes were sparkling with excitement. She seemed really confident. The corner of Ouyang Xiaochen's mouth tilted to reveal a smile. Even if she lost, as long as he was here, she would not be in any harm or be wronged in any way. Vong. Qin Yuyuan plucked the strings of her yang qin. She started first as she was disgusted with their intimate exchange. Her slender fingers plucked the yang qin with great speed. Music streamed out melodiously. The observers were left astounded. This music should only be played in heaven itself. We, mere mortals, wouldn't be able to comprehend and appreciate it. Princess Qin really has remarkable skills. Vong. Murong Shui followed, music streamed out harmoniously. The observers nodded their heads. Her skills were pretty good but not as good as Princess Qin. However, she did manage to express the charm of the tune exquisitely. BDNV seeing that Murong Shui managed to win the admiration of the crowd, Qin Yuyuan narrowed her eyes and took a turn in her playing. The clear melodious tune turned into a sorrowful composition. Almost immediately, it took effect and Yang restaurant was filled with melancholy. The men were expressionless and continued to drink their wine. However, the women had tears in both eyes and were gently wiping them. The fact that she made the crowd shed tears, made her smile proudly. To make people cry listening to music is considered as the highest achievement of playing Yangqin. She could do it so easily. Murong Shui still needs tens of years of practice to achieve that. Sensing Qin Yuyuan's challenge, Murong Shui smirked. With her eyes glistening, she began plucking the Yangqin with impeccable speed. A sudden wind arose and it was like the waters of the Yellow River gushes forward, it was like thousands of horses galloping together. The playing was so powerful and much louder that it made Qin Yuyuan's playing almost inaudible. Throughout the whole restaurant, one could only hear the more powerful and compelling playing of Murong Shui. Qin Yuyuan's face turned pale, she glared furiously at Murong Shui. So this was her idea all along. She knew she couldn't beat her, so she purposely played the higher note to make her playing less audible. Even if her playing was remarkable, people might not be able to hear it, that means she would lose. Such a disgusting tactic. Murong Shui met her glare, her mouth still smirking, as if to say. Try playing an even higher note to make my playing less audible, if you can. Qin Yuyuan's expression darkened. She had met many players who did the same thing, but not one who could do it as well as Murong Shui. She knew she couldn't make Murong Shui's playing less audible. But she could use other ways to win. Qin Yuyuan's mouth curved into a curious smile, her slender fingers furiously plucked at her Yangqin. The delicate music hid an ominous energy that was propelled towards the direction of Murong Shui. Chapter 35, Who Wins and Who Loses? You are listening at novelfull.audio. It was a killing weapon. Ouyang Xiaochen's eyes turned icy. He held the teacup, a blade of ice formed and floated to the surface of the tea. He had prepared it to save Murong Shui. Unexpectedly, Murong Shui saw it coming. She hugged her Yangqin and swiftly turned into her body the nick of time to evade the ominous energy. Vong! The energy struck the wall and splinters of wood exploded out of it. As a result, long, thin marks were etched onto the wall. It had exposed the cement behind the wall. The crowd gasped as they saw the deep markings left behind. Murong Shui had escaped, unhurt. There was a tinge of amusement in Ouyang Xiaochen's eyes. He loosened his grip on his teacup and the ice blade turned into harmless tea water. Using the Yangqin as a murder weapon, Qin Yuyuan's skills were truly staggering. If that had hit her own arm, it would have splintered the flesh to the bone, making her unable to play any longer. Since she couldn't outplay her, she sent a weapon spiraling towards her. She had used such a despicable tactic to win that I won't treat her with courtesy any longer. Murong Shui's mouth curved to reveal a sneer. She placed her hand on her Yangqin and lightly plucked. The melodious music drifted, a note was flung towards Qin Yuyuan. In it, a sinister weapon was hidden. Thunk! The weapon met another note drifting and coincided. It disappeared, but the musical note reflected towards the Meixian private room. Qin Yuyuan squinted, gazing intently, and saw that the musical note was held at the strings of Murong Shui's Yangqin. That same note repelled hers, but it also went back to her Yangqin. She knew that the strings had certain elasticity. But the most skilled players could only fling a note half a meter across. The two private rooms were 8 to 9 meters apart, the repellence was met in the middle of the two rooms. The note was flung at least 4 to 5 meters across. Murong Shui was no simpleton. She hadn't met such a strong opponent in a long time. Inside, she was boiling with excitement. Qin Yuyuan's mouth tilted, it revealed a half-dot smile. Her slender fingers swiftly glided across the Yangqin, streaming out music, but at the same time, daggers of malignant energy were strung out, mercilessly aiming at Murong Shui. Murong Shui raised both her brows, her fingers glided across faster on her Yangqin, making it pour out fleeting music, blades of energy gathered within the strings. She then tossed it across to Qin Yuyuan. Thunk! Thunk! Thunk, the notes and the energy clashed and coincided together in midair, slicing through walls, railings, wooden doors, banisters, making it rain splinters of wood and dust. Some of which ricocheted into the dining hall. The ones in the dining hall had left their seats but did not leave the restaurant. They ran and hid at the foot of the wall. With eyes gleaming with excitement, they craned their necks to try to witness the event. In the air, rhythmic music drifted, but in the front lines, blades of ominous energy were at war. This competition of music playing and fighting was a rare and fascinating scene to behold. Even if it was the end of the world, one mustn't miss it. Qin Yuyuan gently stroked the strings, soothing music came streaming out. The crowd became captivated but then grieved at the sound of it too. Sinister blades of energy came jetting out with the flow of music. The first few blades came in loose order, the rest came one after another with dizzying speed. Murong Shui quickened her pace in playing, the notes became higher and more compelling, bringing a powerful emanation into the air. The notes, hovered in mid-air as if dancing, were actually almost as fast as light. The crowd couldn't even see how many strokes there were. The notes continued its dance as the energy repelled each other again and again. However, they were slowly getting closer towards Qin Yuyuan. The tune was almost at its end when Murong Shui heightened her playing got faster and faster. Without toleration, Qin Yuyuan glared at her and did the same. She launched a blinding white light towards Murong Shui. Qin Yuyuan has already prepared to launch her ultimate weapon. Despicable. Is that stream of white light a silver needle or a dagger? No matter, it doesn't matter, Qin Yuyuan wants to win, doesn't she? She will never let her. Murong Shui's gaze turned icy, her hand made a sudden stroke and a note was sent flying directly at that blinding light. The light was deflected so fast that the crowd couldn't quite get a glimpse of it. With blinding speed, it sliced through the Jiaowei Yangqin. Twang. Twang. Twang, the strings of the Jiaowei Yangqin were sliced clean. Vong, the drifting energy that broke the strings returned to Murong Shui's Yangqin. Its lengthy tail drifted in the air for a moment before returning. With that, Murong Shui ended the tune. Gazing at the Lanxiang private room, she saw Qin Yuyuan sitting stone-faced. Her slender hands were still in mid-air. She was staring at her Jiaowei Yangqin. The strings had all been sliced through and were scattered on her Jiaowei Yangqin. She didn't even get to finish the last few notes of the tune and she will never be able to do it now. Yeyang restaurant became hushed. The crowds were looking at one another, astonished. This was the competition between the future queen of Qinyang and the first wife. Be of Prince Jing, it was incredible. Suddenly someone in the crowd shouted, "Incredible," and the other customers returned to their senses, started shouting praises too. Yeyang restaurant was in a frenzy, their shouts and cheers shook the heavens. They gathered together in groups and started debating among themselves. This competition, who won? Who lost? Needless to say, Princess Qin lost and Miss Murong won. You're right, Princess Qin's playing was excellent and her skills were better than Miss Murong. However, Princess Qin's playing was turned barely audible by Miss Murong and she didn't even finish the last few notes, of course she lost. Murong Shui smiled while looking at Qin Yuyuan. Princess Qin, do you have any objection regarding the result of this competition? Most of the customers in Yeyang restaurant were people who do not play the Yangqin, but there were some of noble background who did. The result was evaluated by them. How could she object? No, Qin Yuyuan replied with a gentle voice, though there was a measure of resistance in it. Well, then your Jiaowei Yangqin belongs to me now. Murong Shui said as she navigated through the crowd. Gracefully, she walked towards Qin Yuyuan and flauntingly hugged her newly owned Jiaowei Yangqin. She smiled and said, "Thank you, Princess Qin." Qin Yuyuan go livid inside. Under her long sleeve, her hand curled into a fist. She was the desert's goddess of music, how could she lose in playing Yangqin, moreover, to Murong Shui who possessed an average skill. It was humiliating. Princess Qin, are you reluctant to give away your Jiaowei Yang Qin? Murong Shui asked, looking at her with her innocent eyes. In Qin Yuyuan eyes, she saw a deep hatred boiling. That Jiaowei Yang Qin was hers, of course she was reluctant to give it away. But Murong Shui had won in front of a public crowd. If she had said she was, it would have meant that she had cowardly backed out of the deal made initially. The citizens of Qinyan City would despise and ridicule her for not keeping her promise. Chapter 36, Jealousy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Shitzi means heir son, referring to the heir apparent of Qinhuang. Qinhuang means a prince of first rank or a prince of blood, of course not. I have always kept my promises. Since you've won, this Jiaowei Yang Qin is yours. Qin Yuyuan calmly replied, a hint of arrogance in her eyes. It's just a Jiaowei Yang Qin, I can afford to lose that. Many thanks, Princess Qin. Murong Shui said, her small hands touched the broken strings. She raised a brow and said, all the strings are broken, even if I did bring it home, I can't play it, you can always buy new strings to replace them. After that, you can play it again. Ouyang Xiaochen gently replied as he approached her. Murong Shui frowned. Jiaowei Yang Qin is a famous classical Yang Qin. Normal strings wouldn't suit it. Even if I played with normal strings, the sound would be awful. Gazing at her gloomy face, Ouyang Xiaochen's eyes lit with humor and he calmly said. I know of a professional Yang Qin maker, I could ask him if he has any strings for a Jiaowei Yang Qin. Thank you very much Ouyang Shitzi. Murong Shui exclaimed, her expression brightening. Jiaowei Yang Qin was a rare kind and she had won it with much effort. It would be a shame if there were no suitable strings for it. If there were, she could get it fixed up and take it out anytime to taunt Qin Yuyuan. Looking at her radiant smile, the corner of Ouyang Xiaochen's mouth curled into a smile. His eyes shone with a gentle and affectionate gleam. In which, all of this made Qin Yuyuan's expression turn sour. In her opinion, Ouyang Xiaochen was an elegant and serious man. When he was in the northern Mongolian deserts, her father, who was the king, sent for him. He wore an icy, distant demeanor when he met her father. So why was he so friendly and amiable when he was talking to Murong Shui? Moreover, he displayed such a heart-warming smile to her. Isn't Murong Shui the girl that Yi Chen, Prince Jing, abandoned, the one who is destined to be Qin Palace's future concubine? Then isn't Ouyang Xiaochen supposed to despise and be disgusted by her? Princess, why is your complexion so pale? Are you feeling okay? A clear voice broke her deep thoughts. Qin Yuyuan frowned and replied in an impatient tone, oh it's nothing. Maybe it's because I'm too tired. The resentment in her eyes quickly vaporized but Murong Shui had already seen it. She smirked and said, Princess Qin, you must have exerted too much energy in the playing. Waiter, is my order done? Serve some of it over to Princess Qin to let her regain her energy. Murong Shui is just trying to ridicule me. Saying that I had drained my energy playing and yet, I have lost to her. Qin Yuyuan shot an icy glare at Murong Shui's direction. Murong Shui pretended not to see it and slowly walked towards the railing. Looking at the dining hall, she said, Storekeeper, please calculate the damages done to the walls, railings, wooden doors, banisters and send the bill to the Zhen Manor. She didn't have the habit of bringing silver coins with her. She could only let them claim it at the palace. Much thanks, Miss Murong. The storekeeper's eyes shone. The battle had been fierce and the many assets destroyed in the process were invaluable. However, one was the princess of the deserts and the other was the young miss of the influential Zhen Manor, both were of high social status. He did not dare to ask for compensation for the fear of provoking them. Storekeeper, you're welcome, as the things were destroyed by me, it is by nature to compensate you. Murong Shui smiled gently then went down while carrying her Yang Qin. Everyone parted away for her, while looking at her with eyes full of appreciation, noble and polite, knowing how to give and take. She is worthy of her status of being the Jeune Manor's young miss, unlike the person in the blue booth, gave a bad attitude even after destroying properties. Qin Yuyuan's expression became stiff, a cunning look flashed through her eyes. When her first music kill trick spoiled the walls, she had thought to compensate the storekeeper, taking the advantage to illustrate her own gentleness and dignity. Never thought that Murong Shui would win. This sent her mind into chaos, temporarily neglected this incident that gave Murong Shui the opportunity to lead. The things in Moon Establishment, what was previously known as Yang Restaurant, I have destroyed the most. It's more appropriate for me to compensation. Murong Shui stopped her footsteps, raised her head and looked towards the blue booth, smiled while saying, Princess Qin has lost her Jiaowei Yang Qin, how could I still let you spend? Let me pay for the compensation. Qin Yuyuan's polite smile immediately froze, the anger in her eyes could almost inflate. She is taunting me again. It is so hateful. Murong Shui turned a blind eye, unhurriedly spoke. Princess Qin, I have other appointment, therefore I will leave first, see you soon. She gave a wave-like posture towards Qin Yuyuan's direction. Murong Shui leisurely walked out of Moon Establishment. The beautiful sunlight shined on her body, unexplainably warm and comfortable, the corner of her lips tilted up. Qin Yuyuan's cunning trick did not give her a lesson, but in turn humiliated herself. Even losing her most beloved Yang Qin, she must be enraged. By my continuous act of taunting her, would definitely explode her lungs by rage. Is the Yang Qin heavy? A clear voice sounded out. Ouyang Shaoqian walked leisurely over. Murong Shui came back from her thoughts immediately, lightly nodded her head. It is quite heavy. Her shoulders have started to ache even though she had carried it for only a few minutes. Let me help you. Ouyang Shaoqian lightly said. I have to trouble you then. Murong Shui blinked her eyes, then passed on the Yang Qin to Ouyang Shaoqian. The distance to Jeune Manor is not short. By the time she carries the Yang Qin home, both her shoulders would be extremely sore till she couldn't lift it up. Ouyang Shaoqian's martial arts are admirable, carrying the Yang Qin would be easy compared to her. Ouyang Shaoqian took over the Yang Qin, and passed it behind. While Murong Shui doubts, she only saw a young man in white suddenly appeared, took over the Yang Qin and easily handled it. Murong Shui blinked her eyes hardly, and yet she still sees a man holding a Yang Qin, slowly lifting his head, with sharp eyes, delicate facial features, and a slight arrogance is entangled in between his eyebrows. So this is the Dark Guardian as mentioned in the legends. They really appear out of nowhere. And in this bright, sunny day, where could they hide? A white sleeve drifted into her vision, blocking her view. Gazing upwards, she saw that she was looking into the fathomless eyes of Ouyang Shaoqian. His pupils reflected her silhouette. What are you looking at? Murong Shui broke her gaze and her eyes swept from side to side. Nothing. Is he your bodyguard? Ouyang Shaoqian calmly said yes and grabbed her wrist, pulling her to move forward. After Sun Feng, the bodyguard of Ouyang Shaoqian, appeared, her gaze was fixed intently on him, and she didn't even bother to look at him. Was Sun Feng better looking than him? Murong Shui's focus was on the bodyguard and nothing else. Eagerly, she asked, Your Highness, what is your bodyguard's name? How long has he been with you? Why did she keep inquiring about Sun Feng? Was Sun Feng more attractive than him? Ouyang Shaoqian turned and lightly raised his brow at Sun Feng. It was like an invisible force that was pressuring Sun Feng. He trembled and secretly sighed inside his heart, Your Highness, this has nothing to do with me. The corner of Ouyang Shaoqian's eye observed that Murong Shui was about to ask more questions about his bodyguard. His expression turned slightly downcast and coldly he said, We've arrived at the Jeune Manor. Editor's note. For those of you confused, Ouyang Shaoqian is referred in the Ross as Shitzi, which means Royal Highness in English. Ouyang Shaoqian is part of the imperial clan, meaning his father is related to the emperor in some way, most likely his brother. Though he is referred to as prince, he is not the son of the emperor, but his father does hold an important position in the imperial clan. The Chinese peerage system is extremely complicated and very different than the European monarchy system. Also, to clear the confusion, there was a mistake in the previous translations. Murong Shui is the young miss of the Zhen manor, not a princess. If you have any other questions or concerns, please comment and I'll try to answer it the best of my ability. Chapter 37, Secret Dating. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Murong Shui took another step and lifted her head to look up. She saw a magnificent emerald-tiled palace in front of her. At the entrance, there were gold letters that glittered in the sunlight that read, Zhen Manor. She had reached home. Thank you, Your Highness, for sending me home. Murong Shui said with a smile, her hand stretched toward Sun Feng, ready to take her claimed prize. Sun Feng's eyes glistened. With a swift movement, he handed the Jiaowei Yangqin to the bodyguard at the entrance and disappeared without a trace within the blink of an eye. Murong Shui blinked, though she could clearly sense a few people passing by, she could not detect any trace of the bodyguard. Her eyes shone with curiosity. Bodyguards truly deserve to be recognized for their skill, appearing out of nowhere and disappearing again without a trace, making it impossible for people to prepare themselves for an assault from them. Looking at her eyes sparkling made Ouyang Xiaochen even more depressed. He had already gone and yet, she was still looking at the direction he disappeared to. Was she really that interested in Sun Feng? This is the wine you wanted to try, bring it back to have a taste. Ouyang Xiaochen grabbed Murong Shui's small hand and placed a small wine bottle into it. His mannerism seemed rough, as if he didn't know how to properly treat a girl. A dull pain passed from her hand and it jolted her to her senses again. Looking at the sealed bottle, she was startled. At first, she was battling with Qin Yuyuan, and then she saw his mysterious bodyguard. She had completely forgotten about the wine. Unexpectedly, Ouyang Xiaochen still remembered. Thank you very much, Your Highness. Your Highness, do you have many bodyguards like him? She was talking about Sun Feng again. Inside, Ouyang Xiaochen furrowed his brow. Impatiently, he replied, do you want me to hand Sun Feng over to you? His voice obviously displaying sarcasm. Murong Shui shook her head, this won't be necessary. My place is quite peaceful, I don't need such an accomplished bodyguard. I'm just very curious about their skill of appearing and disappearing without a trace. Ah, so she wasn't interested in Sun Feng, she was just curious about his bodyguards. Hiding in oblivion, Sun Feng let out a sigh in relief. Luckily she had explained, or else, upon returning to the palace, he wouldn't be let off the hook easily. The gloominess in Ouyang Xiaochen's eyes vanished and his pupils returned to their normal unfathomable state. What they can do, is indeed a unique skill. If you want to know more, you can come to my palace anytime. Thank you, Your Highness. Murong Shui smiled delightfully. Ancient martial arts are so complicated yet splendid. Learning more about it would be a wise decision. The faint smell of bamboo ink encircled her nose and she was suddenly reminded of her sickness. Your Highness, do you still have any fire lotus seeds? If it's convenient for you, I would like to buy all of them. Whenever her sickness strikes, she has to take fire lotus seeds to help herself. She had no hope of gaining any of them from Yi Chen, Prince Jing. All the other fire lotus seeds in her area were purchased by Zhen Manor. However, they were all destroyed by Qin Yang's bodyguard. So far, she could only take the ones Ouyang Xiaochen had given her. Looking at her earnest face, pity formed inside Ouyang Xiaochen. From his sleeve, he took out a white porcelain bottle and gave it to her. I initially had 3 fire lotus seeds, I gave you one last night. Now there are only 2 left, there you go. Thank you so much, Your Highness. Murong Shui got hold of the bottle from him, her delicate hands lightly touching it. She raised her brow. So there are only 2 left. Her attacks were unpredictable. Every time it happened, she must take them. 2 was far from enough. Your Highness, do you know of this medicinal herb named Diang Chao? Diang Chao. Ouyang Xiaochen's eyes had a glimmer of surprise, then it vanished and returned to its normal state once again. He then casually replied, I have heard of it, why did you suddenly ask about this? With her eyes shimmering she explained, my sickness has an extreme yin-yang effect, it needs a medicine which has an extreme yang effect to control it. This medicinal herb, Diang Chao, happens to have a yang effect to it. It has a close effect to a fire lotus seed. And I thought maybe it can be used to replace them. Ouyang Xiaochen frowned, Diang Chao does have a yang effect but it's not extreme. When it encounters an yin effect, its damaging effect would be neutralized. But if it encounters an extreme yin effect, the medicinal impact wouldn't be as potent as a fire lotus seed. So you do know a few things about Diang Chao. Murong Shui emitted a faint smile at his direction. Ouyang Xiaochen lightly coughed, I unintentionally came across it while I was reading. How did you know about it? I also saw it in a book. Her eyes swept nervously from side to side. She had read about it in a modern medical book back in her era, but she didn't expect this era to also have this medicinal herb. Diang Chao's medicinal properties are much more inferior as compared to the fire lotus seed. If you consume it during your attacks, you will suffer a lot. Ouyang Xiaochen said pessimistically. Frostbite attacks are agonizing torments, if a girl could withstand them, that would be her limit. If it were to be more excruciating, then she would really be better off dead. Murong Shui shrugged, it's okay, if Diang Chao can stop the effects of my attacks and let me live, then it's alright. It's better to suffer a bit more than to just give her life up to her sickness. Ouyang Xiaochen's eyes turned solemn and said, the Qinyan Palace has a lot of fire lotus seeds. If you are willing to find Yi Chen, I would never beg him even if I die. Murong Shui snapped at him, interrupting his dialogue. Her eyes depicted iciness and disgust. The corner of Ouyang Xiaochen's mouth curled into a small smile, his jet-black eyes had a hint of whimsy. I will take note of where to find Diang Chao, if I have any news about it, I will immediately inform you. Thanks so much. Murong Shui smiled. Diang Chao did not grow in the neighboring areas. Even if Yi Chen was very powerful, he wouldn't be able to cut the supplies of it. Murong Shui, you still have the guts to come back, a clear, high-pitched voice of a woman chirped from behind. Murong Shui turned and saw Song Qinyan paced quickly towards her, her arms folded behind her back. As she hurried towards her, her hairpin which had a golden butterfly on it flapped with every step she took. This is my home, why can't I come back? As for you, why don't you stay at your own household? Wuan Marquis household. Why do you come to my place? To acquire my mother's dowry, I suppose. What a shame, I'm now in charge of it, you can't touch it one bit. It was as if Song Qinyan was stomped on the foot, her face turned into a swelling red and she glared at Murong Shui. Who cares about your mother's lousy jewelry? This is my grandmother's home, I am here to visit her. But luckily I'm here, otherwise, I wouldn't have known the horrid thing you've done. Cousin Qin Jiang is the eldest grandson of the Du Palace and is very much favored by the Du family. But even so, you had the audacity to hurt him seriously. Just you wait for your punishment. Are you done yet? If you are, then get out of my way. Murong Shui casually said, obviously not taking her threat seriously. Why you? Song Qinyan was choked with anger, her eyes flashed with fury. In the end, she managed to spout out, Cousin Qin Jiang has been in the palace for a long while and you have only just returned. Did you secretly go dating? A white sleeve flashed past out of the corner of her eye, Song Qinyan turned her head to look at it. Suddenly, her eyes widened. Chapter 38, Teasing Her Cousin. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 38. Teasing her cousin. A young man was bathing under the sky in a wooden hot tub. It's him, Ouyang Xiaochen. She saw the prince once before far away from the palace, there is no doubt that he is the prince. I am sorry, Your Highness. Song Qinyan saluted the prince hurriedly, with her heart beating fast and her face blushing. Can't believe that I will meet Prince Ouyang here, what a fate. Ouyang did not give her a glance but stared at Morong Shui. Who is she? Morong Shui answered coolly. I don't know her. Bullshit. Song Qinyan stand up immediately and replies Morong Shui with a fierce look. I am the daughter of Wuan Marquis, the one that grew up with you since we are young, and you said that you don't know who am I. The daughter of Wuan Marquis should be a person who is tender and virtuous, full of knowledge, it won't be a person like you who is unruly and capricious. Morong Shui replied with ridicule. You. Song Qinyan glared at Morong Shui angrily but she couldn't think of anything to say back. Sun Feng appeared obviously and reminded Ouyang Xiaochen. Your Highness. It is going to be 1:15. Shui'er, I'll leave first as I have something to do. Morong Shui smiled and replied, all right, Your Highness. Ouyang Xiaochen turned around and walked along the road, then disappeared from the light of sunshine. Song Qinyan looked at it blankly. Prince Ouyang had just left without looking or talking to her. Imperial bodyguard Li, bring this Jiawei Qin to Luo Shui Pavilion, Morong Shui coolly ordered. Song Qinyan started to get very angry and said. Morong Shui, you are a fiancé to someone, please take note of your own identity. Song Qinyan had clearly noticed how Ouyang Shitzi had called Morong Shui. Shui'er, but she knew that such a noble person wouldn't get close to a girl who had an engagement. It was for certain that Morong Shui was the one who kept on bewitching him shamelessly. Dovi Ko, this is none of your business. It is better that you mind your own business. Morong Shui reprimanded, calm and severely. All of a sudden, Song Qinyan got so angry and yelled. I would not bother if you weren't the one who keeps on pestering Prince Ouyang. Oh, so you've fallen in love with Ouyang Xiaochen. What a pity he doesn't like you back. Morong Shui said, raising her brow. She didn't know what type of girls Ouyang Xiaochen was into, but she knew he wasn't interested in someone like Song Qinyan who was immensely selfish, stubborn and immature. With her thoughts deciphered, Song Qinyan flushed. She glared at Morong Shui, enunciating every word, Ouyang Xiaochen doesn't like you too, don't you think too highly of yourself? Morong Shui laughed sarcastically, I know my place, not like someone who always likes to daydream and vainly attempt to take a share of something she can't have. Morong Shui, don't you dare ridicule me. Song Qinyan glowered, her eyes were raging with hatred. I didn't even point out any names, you said it yourself. Morong Shui casually replied. She turned to walk into the palace. With contempt in her eyes and an air of arrogance, she completely ignored Song Qinyan. At that moment, Song Qinyan's face darkened to a dangerous shade of murder. With 2.3 steps, she ran in front of Morong Shui and wanted to push her down the stairs. Morong Shui had realized what was about to happen and swiftly turned to one side. Song Qinyan used all of her might and pushed at what was supposed to be Morong Shui but now was thin air. Having lost her balance, down she tumbled to the bottom of the steps with a loud noise. Ah! The mournful wailing echoed, so loud that the gatekeepers trembled and looked over to the direction where it came from. Song Qinyan was flat-faced on the floor. Her dress robe torn, exposing her bare arm which was bruised with a purplish green. With her whole body aching, Song Qinyan tried her best to stand but could only force herself to a half-crawl half-stand. Glaring furiously at Morong Shui's direction, Morong Shui, how dare you push me? Morong Shui lifted her hand to interrupt her, from above the steps she looked at her and said, Miss Song, you should never spout such nonsense. It was you, yourself who fell down the steps, the gatekeepers clearly saw it with their own eyes. Don't try to push the blame on me. Song Qinyan's eyes swept nervously from side to side, lifting her chin she challenged, these gatekeepers are yours, of course they would obey and tell others that you were innocent if you told them to do so. Having failed at pushing Morong Shui down, moreover, having fallen down herself, she would never confess what happened. So, she had to put the blame on Murong Shue, to let her be punished, as revenge. What you say is true. Murong Shue contemplated deeply while nodding her head. You and I have been in conflict for a long time. Even the Jing city citizens have heard about it. If you claim that I had pushed you, even if someone proved your statement wrong, they won't be convinced. Guard Zhang, bring Miss Song over here. Yes, miss. Guard Zhang sweated nervously, not understanding why Murong Shue had made this command. But he obeyed. He did as he was asked as he bowed at her before proceeding towards Song Qinyan. Guard Zhang was a strong man. As he was approaching, an unseen pressure made Song Qinyan tremble and she shouted, Murong Shue, what do you think you're doing? Since you claim that I had pushed you, then I should do just that. So at least I don't get accused of doing what I didn't do. These 3 to 4 flights of stairs aren't really very long or short. But if you fell and became a retard, hopefully you can bear with it. Murong Shue smiled while casually replying her. Song Qinyan momentarily stopped breathing and her face swelled with fury. Murong Shue, you evil woman. I just accused her of something trivial and she's ready to push me down to become a retard. Seeing that Guard Zhang was almost where she was and that there weren't many passers-byers, she quickly shouted, I accidentally fell down the steps myself, cousin Shue had nothing to do with it. Lately, Murong Shue had been rather wicked. If she said she might accidentally cause her to become a retard by pushing her, she would certainly believe she would. By then, when she had become one, it would have been too late. Murong Shue raised her brow and said sarcastically, cousin, you change your mind rather quickly, I must say, did you accidentally knock your head in the process and blur your thoughts? No, no. Song Qinyan quickly shook her head and shouted in a clear voice, Qinyan, myself is very much awake and thinking clearly right now. I accidentally fell down the steps myself, no one was involved in this. Since it is so, then Guard Zhang please return to your former position and stand guard, you no longer have to help her up. Murong Shue nodded, satisfied with her answer and gracefully walked into the palace. Song Qinyan was only a minion, she need not waste any more of her energy on her, she should save it for the sly fox that awaited her in the palace. Seeing her disappearing into the palace, Song Qinyan's eyes burned with fury. In her anger, she knitted 3 words together. Murong Shue. Chapter 39, Spitting Blood. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Radiant sunlight shone through the mosaic pattern of the leaves onto the emerald floor of the palace, reflecting halos of light. Murong Shue bathed in the golden ethereal light, with one hand holding the wine, she paced forward. Murong Shue, a familiar voice broke the peaceful scene. Murong Shue turned and saw Mr. Du with a 30-year-old man who was charging towards her. Behind the 2 men were about 10 female slaves and their grandma. She knew the man, he was the Du family's nephew, Du Qinzhang's father, Du Yi. He was in charge of the Tai Chung temple, he was also one of the 4 officials of it. Murong Shue's lips curled into a sarcastic smile. They had come quickly, it was almost as if the moment she stepped into the manor, Mr. Du had received news that she had returned. He then proceeded to bring a large number of people with him to block her way. Grandma, Official Du, why have you brought such a huge parade to welcome me? Is this a trial for religious offenses or a trial for crime? Murong Shue, don't you interrupt. Qinjiang has accused you of seriously injuring him. How did this happen? Du Yi interrogated with an air of seriousness. Murong Shue raised her brow. And thus, the trial has begun. There wasn't any rubbish talk at the front but it was straight to the point. And so, she had to oblige to play along. It was he who teased me. That's why I had to teach him a lesson. Rubbish. Qinjiang is your cousin, he would never have teased you. Du Yi's hoarse voice interrupted her, not believing her explanation. You watch Du Qinjiang grow up, you must very well know about his lustful manner towards beautiful women. Whenever he sees one, he goes up to tease them, isn't that what he normally does? Dewey choked. Upon close examination, he found she had inky black hair, her eyebrows were beautifully arched like a painting, her face exquisite. Morong Shue saw him examining her beauty. Just then, he spoke up again, even if Qin Jiang did tease you, you could have just punished him lightly, why did you inflict such serious injuries on him? Did you know that you had kicked Qin Jiang until he had almost become crippled? Don't worry, Du Qin Jiang is related to me, I would never have the heart to cripple him. At the most, I would just teach him a lesson that will be etched into his memory, serving as a purpose to remind him to never tease me again. Du Qin Jiang is the Du family's eldest grandson, if she had crippled him, the Du family would never let her go easily. She wasn't afraid of their evil plans to get back at her, it was just that she didn't have much power in her current position now, since her parents couldn't protect her and the Du family was waiting for the chance for revenge, of course she wouldn't let them have it their way. Seeing that Morong Shue still wore a casual manner when confronted, Du Yi's face darkened. He muttered, "You've seriously injured someone, not only did you not reflect on what you did or apologized, moreover, you had the audacity to rebut our accusations, what an uneducated child." Shut up. Whether I was properly educated or not, isn't something that you are in a position to tell me off. Morong Shue interrupted his mutterings and gazed coldly at him, not to mention you, official Du, have you ever heard of the idiom, like father, like son? Du Qin Jiang would never have become like this, it was you who shaped it. But you should be grateful as the person he teased was me, not a royal monarchy princess. If not, he would have long become an eunuch by now or lay in the dungeons to rot. Dewey spouted, why you? You didn't have the ability to educate your son, and I helped you do so. With him punished, he would most probably cause less trouble. Fine, if you're ungrateful for it, but you had the nerve ridiculed me instead. Morong Shue finished what she left unsaid and eyed Dewey with contempt. Fine, fine, fine. Dewey was so angry that he was laughing, which was odd, even odder was the fact he uttered fine 3 times in a row even though nothing was fine, you really are good with words and a pro in confusing the truth with falsehood. I'm just being honest, how can that be confusing the truth with falsehood? Morong Shue looked sideways at him, her face innocent, I don't find it weird that you don't listen to me. Since stone, cold truth is always hard to accept. The truth is ugly, and this world has very few of those who are emphatic and just. Most of them are corrupted and unreasonable. Dewey's face became green, is she implying that he is an unreasonable person who uses his power to bully the weak? Morong Shue, I am your uncle. Who taught you to speak so rudely to an elder? Don't you know how to respect the elderly and love the young? The fact that she kept replying him sarcastically made him furious. Respect the elderly and love the young. Morong Shue raised her brow at Dewey, as if mocking him, official Du, respect should be mutual. You, yourself don't even love the young and you want me to respect the elderly. You must be joking. You. Dewey glared at Morong Shue, he was so enraged that he couldn't even speak. Suddenly, a spit swelled in his throat. Unable to contain it, he spitted it out. It was blood. What happened to you? Someone, please help. Mr. Du panicked and shouted. The female slaves and the grandma surrounded them. Some wiped blood, some helped to carry Dewey, it was a chaotic scene. Morong Shue stood outside the scene gazing at the pale-faced Dewey, she lightly raised her brow. It was just a few sentences and it was enough to make him spit out blood. He must be really weak, I don't understand how he could even become one of the officials of the Tai Chang Temple. Grandma, official Du, take your time, I must excuse myself to go to my residence now. Morong Shue casually responded. Smiling politely, she turned and went towards her residence. Dewey was so angry that he had spitted out blood, he must not be in the mood to punish me right now, I can finally be at peace. Turning a corner, she had reached the door of her residence. Morong Shue ordered, Hong Xiu, come out to take my Jiaowei Yangqin and my things. Also, go to the kitchen to prepare a few dishes for me. From noon till now, she was busy handling a bunch of terrible people. She hadn't even had the chance to have lunch. A glass of wine that Ouyang Xiaochen had given to her and a few dishes sounded like a good idea. Sister, sister, a surprised voice poured into her ears. Murong Yi rushed out of Murong Shue's residence. His robe was a mess, his hair ornament had swayed to one side, his eyes had thin streaks of red lines in them and he had dark circles under his eyes. Seeing Murong Shue, his eyes shone. After skimming her for any damages, he let out a long sigh, his expression brightened and said, "You're all right." Murong Shue gave out a wry smile. After she had consumed the fire lotus seed, she had fallen asleep without saying goodnight to Murong Yi. "You didn't sleep the whole night. How could I sleep after you had disappeared?" Murong Yi said, flailing his hands in the air. Suddenly he thought of something and whispered, "Sister, did you take any fire lotus seeds last night?" Murong Shue nodded, "Yup. If she hadn't, she would have been dead by now." "Then, how come you are back so early?" Murong Yi asked, shocked. "Last time, when you took them, you would sleep for at least 12 hours. Murong Shue jolted. Every time when she attacked strike, the host would be tormented endlessly. She never noticed how long she was out. But when she thought about it, it was true that she would be asleep for at least 10 hours. However, she took the fire lotus seed between 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. and awoke between 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. She had only been asleep for about 4 hours. What was happening? Just then, a purple robe drifted into the corner of her eye. Murong Shue immediately returned to her senses. Gazing up, she saw a familiar handsome face. Her gaze turned into a fierce, defensive one. "Yi Chen, why are you here?" Chapter 40, Date. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Gongzi. Young master, basically what most rich teenage boys in ancient China were referred to as Darren. An authoritative person you respect. Yi Chen didn't reply. He stood at the entrance and gazed coldly at Murong Shue. He examined her, her small beautiful face, her cherry lips, and her long slender neck. They didn't display any ambiguous mark on them. He continued to study her, her small hand holding a small wine bottle, the sleeve of her green robe sliding down as she was doing so, revealing her fair skin. She was still an innocent virgin. She did not do anything that she wasn't supposed to with Ouyang Xiaochen. Yi Chen let out a sigh of relief and calmly said, "You are my future wife. Be, please remember that. Do not simply associate with other men." "Prince Jing, Yi Chen, I have already broken off the engagement. To the knowledge of the Jing city citizens, your future wife. Be is Qin Yuan, the Princess of Mobile. Please do not associate me with that disgusting label." Murong Shue interrupted him, her eyes filled with hatred. Yi Chen's face turned gloomy, he gazed at her intently and enunciated every word, "We have not broken off the engagement." Murong Shue casually replied, "All that sort of, is a wedding ceremony. You should remind King of Mobile, Qin Yuan's father, and ask him to hurry over to Qin Yan. You really are in a hurry to cut all ties with me, aren't you?" Yi Chen said solemnly. "If I don't, do I just let you demean me to a concubine instead?" Murong Shue raised her brow, looking at him, her gaze sarcastic. "I am the first daughter of Zhen Manor, I won't be dumb enough to become someone's concubine instead of someone else's first wife. No one will take you as their first wife." Yi Chen calmly gazed at her. All the noble families in the city know, he had specially requested her to be his concubine, second wife. If anyone took her as their wife, it would mean that they were provoking Yi Chen. In the whole city of Qinyan, not many would dare to do so. "I'd rather never be married than be your concubine." Her cold steel, resolute voice bore into his ears. Yi Chen's mouth curled into a smile. She loved to say that, but she could only speak about it and do nothing. It is because Yi Chen will force her until she has no choice but to be his concubine. Lifting his head to gaze at Morong Shue, his eyes came across a familiar object. He was filled with suspicion. How did this happen? Morong Shue followed his gaze and found that he was looking at the Jiaowei Yangqin the guard was holding. She smiled and said, "You need not doubt no more, and this is your future wife's Jiaowei Yangqin. She had lost to me in a Yangqin playing competition and she surrendered it to me." What? Qin Yiyuan had lost to Morong Shue. Yi Chen's eyes shone with disbelief, then it vanished and they returned to normal. "As long as you like it," he calmly said and then proceeded to make his exit. Looking at his disappearing silhouette, Morong Shue stared in disbelief and blinked. And just like that he's gone. He didn't even bother to punish her on behalf of his future wife. She had beaten her in public and that had very much humiliated her. "Where had you been last night, sister?" The sound of caring caught Morong Shue's ear, then she replied. "Went to another courtyard to put up a night." She had been to Xiaoyao Palace, also had slept on Ouyang Xiaochen's bed. It is better not to say anything to avoid him from thinking unnecessary things. "Oh, I see." Morong Yi nodded his head. He heard a fight sound in the woods then rush out last night, but there was nothing beside the hot spring pool. When he was getting ready to go out to look for her, there was a note flew in and it written there, "Morong Shue is safe and sound, don't worry, stay in the mansion." He was still worrying about her, but doesn't know where to find her, ended up stood in Lu Shui Pavilion for the whole night. "Who gave you the fire lotus seed that you took?" "I was in my sickness and felt dizzy that time, didn't get to see the person's face clearly." Morong Shue replied with perfunctory. It is not that she doesn't want to tell that it was Ouyang Xiaochen, it's because, if she did so, then the fact that she had put up a night at Xiaoyao Palace might be known. It is truly unfortunate then. Morong Yi sighed. He thought that he could buy fire lotus seed from that person. The cold poison attack will only be triggered after a period of time. We can still have time to find the fire lotus seed, but the most important thing now is to deal with Yi Chen. Morong Shue said. He had appeared in Lu Shui Pavilion and left with unhurried words, but there was something odd about the way he talked, like he had already planned something. She has to be careful. Indeed. Morong Yi agreed with her. Her sister had already terminated the engagement, but Yi Chen still came and disturbed her frequently. How annoying it was. He wanted a way that could stop Yi Chen from disturbing his sister. The weather became hotter day by day. The garden looked very exquisite in Zhenguo Pavilion. There were different types of flowers, and it was very colorful when one gazed at it from afar. Morong Shue took a pot of tea and sat on the stone furniture in front of the garden. She tasted the tea slowly as warm sunshine touched her skin. It was so comfortable. "Sister." Morong Yi called her softly and walked towards her. He smiled and introduced. "This is Gu Daren's son, Gu Haoyu Gongzi. This is my sister Morong Shue." "Gu Gongzi." Morong Shue greeted him politely. Looking at the way he smiled, she said. "Gu Gongzi, please excuse us." Morong Shue stood up quickly and pulled Morong Yi aside. "What do you mean by this? Obviously this is a blind date." Morong Yi laughed happily. "Blind date?" Morong Shue replied, "You arranged for me to have a blind date when my engagement with Yi Chen is not formally terminated yet. Yi Chen still disturbs you frequently, right? If you found a person who is willing to take you as his wife, then Yi Chen has no reason to disturb you anymore." Morong Yi said it as it is a fact. Morong Shue shakes her head. "You are too naive, though there is for sure an underhanded reason why Yi Chen keeps on disturbing me. He will not stop even if there is another guy." Morong Yi didn't really care. Who cares about the reason? He cannot disturb you if you get married after the engagement is terminated. Editor's note. Anyone else want to punch Yi Chen in the face and dump him in a hole? Raise his hand.